Prior to World War II, Germany foresaw great potential for jet-powered aircraft, powered by the engine Hans von Ohlheim constructed in 1936. Germany's sentiment would be reinforced after the flight of the world's first jet, the Heinkel 178. Immediately after the invasion of Poland, Germany would adopt the jet engine for use in a new advanced aircraft design. It would be known as Project 1065. The German Ministry of Aviation specified the jet needed to have 1 hour of flight time and a speed of at least 530 miles per hour. The design team was led by Woldemar Voigt. The project was put into motion. It had a long way to go before being actualized. The initial plans made for the jet were immensely different from the eventual Messerschmitt 262. The original design featured wing root-mounted engines, unlike the podded engines the Me-262 would end up with. The reason for this change was due to technical problems with the jet engines, and they wanted the pod-mounted engines so they could be easily replaced and serviced. This turned out to be an important decision for both availability and maintenance of the engines. That was not the only setback, though. Further troubles would arise as high-ranking officials would seek to cut funding for the program, due to them believing the war could be easily won with conventional aircraft, such as the Bf-109. One such official was Hermann Göring, who was the head of the Luftwaffe. He ended up cutting the jet engine program down to only 35 engineers in February 1940. A serious problem for the jet engines was a lack of alloy that could withstand the temperatures needed for operation. After a November 1941 test flight with the BMW 003 engine, it ended in both of them failing. The project would switch to the UMO 004 engines and made its first entirely jet-powered flight on the 18th of July 1942. Further delays for the fighter would occur in 1943 when Hitler envisioned the Me-262 as a ground attack aircraft rather than a defensive interceptor. This then put more concentration on the Sturmvogel variant of the Me-262, which interfered with the introduction of the Me-262 fighter. After Adolf Hitler finally approved mass production of the Me-262 in 1944, the first unit for it would be formed on April 19th. It was called Erprobungskommando 262. The unit would be located at Lechfeld. Their task was to introduce the Me-262 into service and train a corps of pilots to fly it. Testing of the Me-262 showed it had much better handling than previous German fighters, such as the Bf-109 and FW-190. It was stated in a report by Major Ernst Englander that any Bf-109 pilot could make the transition to the Me-262 with only an hour of instruction, and bomber pilots only required 3 instruction flights. The Me-262 had gentle land characteristics compared to the other German fighters of the time, with it having a soft stall and use of a tricycle landing gear arrangement. The big downside though was the brakes could not be used in landing until the nose wheel had touched the ground, otherwise it would cause the nose to smash down violently and damage the landing gear, or even the aircraft itself. In the air, handling would improve as the speed got faster, and it didn't lose as much speed in turns as other fighters. The cruise speed of the Me-262 was 465 miles per hour, and it could reach speeds of over 530 miles per hour, which was faster than any other fighter in the European theater. The cockpit would also provide superior visibility for the pilot than other German aircraft. In July 1944, the unit was renamed Kommando Novotny. After Major Walter Novotny took over command, the unit would mount the first jet fighter operations and would fly operational missions against the Allies in August 1944. The initial operations would claim 19 Allied aircraft for the loss of 6 Me-262s. After this operation, the unit was given orders to stay grounded. However, on November 8, 1944, Major Novotny refused to follow the order and chose to fly a mission against an Allied bomber raid. In doing so, he destroyed 2 P-51Ds before he had an engine failure. He dove away to attempt an engine restart where he was attacked by more Mustangs and forced to bail out, and he died. After this incident, the unit was withdrawn to undergo more flight training and to revise the Me-262's combat tactics to tailor it to the strengths it had. It wouldn't be until March 1945 when the Me-262 was able to launch large-scale attacks on Allied bombers. For the first time, the unit that would be conducting these operations would be WWII 7, which was formed to be a pure jet fighter wing. JG-7 would launch 37 Me-262s to intercept a force of 1,221 bombers and 632 escorting fighters on the 18th of March. They shot down 12 bombers and 1 fighter for the loss of 3 Me-262s. Although the 4-to-1 ratio is what the Luftwaffe needed, the overall success of the Me-262 was minor due to it being a very small portion of the Air Force. During the last days of the war, WWII 7 would use the Me-262 to attack Soviet ground forces in an attempt to support the Wehrmacht. They would get moderate success downing some Soviet aircraft and destroying many trucks, however, not without losses. Even with the losses, JG-7 managed to operate the Me-262 all the way to the end of the war. And on the 8th of May 1945, Fritz Stahler would score the Luftwaffe's final air victory, shooting down a Soviet P-39 Airacobra. Despite the many deficiencies of the Me-262, it marked the end of the piston engine fighters. It became a formidable air superiority fighter once Luftwaffe pilots would learn how to operate it at high speeds. Pilots such as Franz Schall, who managed to shoot down 17 Allied aircraft in the Me-262, 10 of them being the P-51 Mustang. Pilots would find the Me-262 had good maneuverability despite its high wing loading and the lack of low-speed thrust. The controls were very light and effective all the way up to the maximum speed permissible. As long as the Me-262 pilots were not drawn into a turn fight, they were relatively safe because it could easily outrun Allied aircraft. Bomber crews had an even harder time shooting them down due to the electronic gun turrets having problems tracking targets. And the Me-262 closed a distance so fast and remained in a firing position for a very brief time. The Me-262 was a difficult aircraft to counter. However, turbojets of the era did not provide enough low-speed thrust, and the throttle response of the Me-262 was slow and caused issues if quickly adjusted. This would leave the aircraft vulnerable during low-speed flying, such as in takeoff or landing, which is when Allied fighters would shoot it down. Arguably the most potent threat during the landing was the Hawker Tempest. It scored several kills against German jets. This was due to it being extremely fast at low altitudes, and it was heavily armed. The Americans were able to destroy several Me-262s as well, the most well-known pilot being Lieutenant Chuck Yeager, who was one of the first American pilots to shoot one down. By the end of the war, about 1,400 Me-262s were produced. Less than 100 of them were in combat-ready condition at any time during service. Sources claim the Me-262 shot down approximately 300 to 450 Allied aircraft, to the loss of about 100 aircraft lost in the air due to Allied pilots. Many more were destroyed in bombing raids. After the war, the Me-262 was easily found in repairable condition, and the Allies confiscated them to conduct tests. After the tests, it was found the Me-262 was a superior fighter than Allied fighter jets such as the Lockheed P-80 and the Gloucester Meteor. Captain Eric Brown, an RAF test pilot who flew 487 types of planes during his service, flew a captured Me-262 after the end of the war. He referred to the Me-262 as, quote, the most formidable aircraft of World War II. He noted that it had a number of innovative features, but in terms of performance, was a quantum jump ahead of other planes at the time. In particular, he noted its swept-back wings, its axial axial flow jet engine and the 4 powerful 30mm cannons. He stated that it was significantly faster than the fastest Spitfire at the time, and with that speed, you could conduct combat totally on your own terms. If you didn't want to engage, you could go off and leave everyone standing. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Make sure to hit the bell icon to be informed when I release new videos.